Today, we're talking about the major news outlets and whether they have learned lessons from the missteps of the past. Spoiler alert, it looks like they have not. My name is Brittany Page, and this is The Page Perspective. At the request of many of you, before we get into it, I have finally turned on channel memberships. So now, if you enjoy and appreciate my work, you can click the join button below and support this channel for $1.99 per month. Thanks to all of you who engage with my content and care about making our world a better place. So the big question today is it possible to be objective? When you think of outlets like the New York Times or the Washington Post, your opinion of these outlets probably depends on your political orientation or how frequently you read the reporting from these outlets and whether they've ever let you down or disappointed you, whether you have a particular columnist that you love from those outlets. Shout out to Jamel Bowie. I think it's a good idea every once in a while to check in and assess where we are with our media consumption. Which news outlets do you tend to follow, subscribe to, read? Which do you avoid? What are you hoping to gain by following the news, by reading reporting from these outlets that you follow? And are they doing a good job of informing you? Well, as a starting point for answering some of these questions, the Columbia Journalism Review published an insightful article about the major news outlets and their reporting habits in the months leading up to the presidential election in 2016 and the midterms in 2022. Specifically, they looked at the front pages and headlines showing the reporting priorities for both the New York Times and the Washington Post. Now, think about what you'd expect from these media outlets in the months leading up to such a consequential election, such pivotal moments for our fragile democracy. What would you want to see? Maybe detailed analysis of policy issues, illuminating the differences between Democrats and Republicans, maybe deep dives into the backgrounds of candidates, but in a factual way, not in a way that tries to create some sort of false equivalence between the overwhelming illegal, unethical, and general wrongdoing from someone like Donald Trump and whoever is running against him, like the Times did with Hillary Clinton in 2016. In fact, let's start there so we can get an idea of what we're working with here. According to the Columbia Journalism Review, quote, "We decided to look at what had been featured on the printed front page of the New York Times in the 3 months leading up to Election Day. Of 150 articles that discussed the campaign, only a handful mentioned policy. The vast majority covered horse race politics or personal scandals. Most strikingly, the Times ran 10 front page stories about Hillary Clinton's email server. Quote, if voters had wanted to educate themselves on issues, we concluded, they would not have learned much from reading the Times." And this was in 2016. So Columbia Journalism Review wanted to see if the media has learned some lessons in the aftermath of that election. Did they do some soul searching related to what to emphasize, what to focus on in their reporting, or is it still more of the same? Are they turning away from politics as entertainment and toward policy, toward informing the public? Well, after the 2022 midterms, they again analyzed printed front pages from both the New York Times and the Washington Post from September 1st, 2022 through Election Day. Here's what they found. The Times and the Post shared significant overlap in their domestic politics coverage, offering little insight into policy. Both emphasized the horse race and campaign palace intrigue, stories that functioned more to entertain readers than to educate them on essential differences between political parties. The main point of contrast we found between the two papers was that while the Post delved more into topics Democrats generally want to discuss, affirmative action, police reform, LGBTQ rights, the Times tended to focus on subjects important to Republicans, China, immigration, and crime. Exit polls indicated that Democrats cared most about abortion and gun policy. Crime and inflation and immigration were top of mind for Republicans. In the Times, Republican-favored topics accounted for 37 articles, while Democratic topics accounted for just 7. In the Post, Republican topics were the focus of 20 articles, and Democratic topics accounted for 15, a much more balanced showing. In the final days before the election, we noticed that the Times, in particular, hit a drumbeat of fear about the economy, the worries of voters, exploitation by companies, and anxieties related to the Federal Reserve, as well as crime. Data buried within articles occasionally refuted the fear-based premise of a piece, still, by discussing how much people were concerned about inflation and crime and reporting in those stories that Republicans benefited from a sense of alarm. The Times suggested that inflation and crime were historically bad, parenthetically, they were not, and that Republicans had solutions to offer, parenthetically, they did not. So where does it leave us when the most prominent media outlets, the most famous, the most recognized, the most trusted, are failing to inform people about the things that actually matter, and instead reporting on the horse race, working to entertain rather than educate, highlighting issues that exacerbate fear and burying the facts that refute those fears deep in the article where a reader might not even find it? What do we do when the New York Times is overemphasizing issues like crime, immigration, and inflation, issues that are important to Republicans, over other relevant issues like abortion? Well, we get voters who are not informed. And this whole mess reminds me of a New York Times article I read this month, and the title was "We Talked to Some Kamala But Not Joe Voters." Here's what they said. And I want to highlight just one brief segment from this article. Honestly, it was more of a choice of it just not being Joe Biden, said Clara, a 21-year-old financial analyst in Las Vegas, of her support for Ms. Harris. She said she would probably vote for Mr. Trump. Quote, "Personally, I think we were doing a lot better when he was in the presidency, price-wise, money-wise, income-wise. Yet in some ways, Clara is the kind of voter Mr. Biden hopes he can win once people start focusing on the race. Mr. Trump has offended her as a woman," she said, "and she likes some of what Mr. Biden has done, including his support for Israel. Most of all," she said, "she strongly supports abortion rights and did not realize that Mr. Biden does too. She said that because states' abortion bans had gone into effect during his presidency, she assumed it was because of him. Ultimately, despite her misgivings about the economy, support for abortion rights would probably be what decided her vote," she said. You have to wonder how something like this happens. How does this happen? This voter believes that because abortion bans went into effect during Biden's presidency, those abortion bans are something he wanted. Anyone even remotely connected to the reality here knows that's not the case. Some have speculated that this voter being unaware of his stance on abortion is actually Biden's fault, that he is not as forceful in his support of abortion as he should be, that he refrains from even using the word abortion. But could it also be that outlets like the New York Times published twice as many articles on crime as abortion leading up to the midterms, and that trend has probably continued? Quote, "Abortion rights were clearly critical to the midterms, with potential impact on laws and judges, whereas crime rates were essentially irrelevant, with no discernible policy hanging in the balance. Yet the Times chose to publish twice as many articles on crime, a topic generally favored by Republicans, as on abortion, a topic key to Democrats." So what is the lesson in all of this? I think there are many. The media obviously needs to do a better job. They are failing at a critical time when democracy literally hangs in the balance. Being the only occupation that is specifically protected under the First Amendment, they have an obligation because of that protection to do right by the system, to do right by the people in this country. They are writing a soap opera script rather than reporting what is actually happening. I think one important part of this is to be aware of people who claim to be objective in their reporting or views. Newsrooms may proclaim an objective stance, but everything is subjective, from which topics they choose to put on the front page, to which words reporters select while they're speaking or writing a written piece, what reporters emphasize in that reporting, what they leave out in that reporting. We want people who are honest, who maintain a commitment to truth, but who are also honest about their priorities. I have always tried to do that here, even though I'm not a journalist. I focus on people, specifically a lot of people that are in marginalized groups. And those are important stories to me because you're here. I assume those are also important stories for you. And I want to share those stories and focus on policies and elected officials who will make life better for those people. The topics I choose to talk about here and on my podcast, I doubt it, represent my values. Do I occasionally throw in a video about Lauren Boebert? Of course, but only if it's relevant to what I think is important. Challenging the myth of meritocracy or advocating for a robust social safety net and generally informing the public. So as we move into the upcoming election, try to consume your media with a critical eye. Is the thing you're reading or watching designed to inform or entertain? Is it factual? Is there a bias? And listen, sometimes we need a break from the hell, and entertainment is what we need. But I don't want that to be a priority for the New York Times and the Washington Post. I want them to focus on the education. The rest of us can check in and out of the education/entertainment media consumption. The front page of the New York Times, that's a different story. What do you think? I'd love to know. You can call, leave me a voicemail, 657-464-7609, or you can send an email to idoubtit@dollemore.com. You can now support me here on YouTube by becoming a channel member. Click the join button below to see the details and the benefits that come along with a membership. I hope you all have a nice break from the news during the holiday and that this holiday season lands smoothly for you. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. Take care, and I will see you next time.